My name is Toby. Today is my 20th birthday. It has been 2 years since the incident, and still I'm unable to forget that thing. This happened 2 years ago when I got my car. There was this one night where my dad and I got into an argument about something I can barely remember. Being this rebellious son, I told my dad I had to go and would see him the next day. Angered, he pushed me outside the house and told me to get out. I kicked his car when I passed by it, then got into my car. I wandered off to the edge of the town and decided to run along the highway and speed a bit, given it was past midnight when I left. I drank a little while driving towards the highway, so it's no joke that I would be seeing things along the road. I started driving along the highway and sped up to 70 miles per hour and speeding up to 90 when there are no cars around. For some reason, I started seeing things like an upside-down car, a flying tree, and a couple of deer running. It was really something, but I was about to see something stranger, unsettling even. It was a giant face peeking over the trees. "What the?" I said. I slammed onto the brakes and came to a smooth stroll of 75 miles to a complete halt. I got out of the car and looked behind but saw nothing. I got back into the car and switched on the high beams to check the woods in front, but there was nothing. I got more curious and wanted to know if what I saw was true or just my imagination. I pulled out my army flashlight, a powerful flashlight that will leave you blind for 2 months if you look directly into the light. I shined it over the woods but only found deers running. Then from afar, I could hear branches snapping and leaves rustling like something is passing through them very quickly. I became anxious. Even there I was thinking that it could just have been my imagination. I got inside the car, locked all doors and closed all windows to avoid anything or anyone from getting in. I started the car and accelerated fast until I couldn't hear it anymore. It has been just a few seconds when I saw it through the rearview mirror. The giant face I saw was the face of a giant worm, and it was crawling fast, chasing my car. I floored it and was able to leave the worm behind. I breathed a sigh of relief when I could no longer see it. When I got home, I was still shaking in fear. My dad saw me and grabbed me by the shoulder and asked me what happened. I tried to speak but was bursting everything out. He told me to sit down on the sofa and calm down. I was able to take a breather, then told him word for word what happened. He chuckled a bit, then his smile vanished when I got to the part about the giant worm. He looked me in the eye and said, "What you saw was real." He then told me what he knew about the giant worm, and I was shocked to hear about it. He never told anyone of this because he knew no one would believe him. I tried to search it up on the internet and saw some strange article about what they call the highway worm. There was an illustration from a guy named Trevor Henderson, and it looked exactly like what I saw. I don't know if any articles were true, but I hope no one else should experience this. I was driving from Atlanta to Lexington to visit my parents. I like to drive at night since there are less people on the road and I can take my time. At around 3 a.m. or so, I had stopped at a gas station and picked up coffee and some grubs. I was back on the road in about an hour and was listening to the radio when I started getting a little drowsy, so I'd take a sip. The road was quiet,
No cars in sight except for a few spotted on the side of the road here and there. In the distance, I can make out what looks like a hitchhiker, or what I think is one, but can't really tell due to such low light. As I get closer, I start to notice other things like how the person is kind of thin and tall. And at about 20 feet, it turns around and lock eyes with me as I pass by. This person was creepy as hell. Its face was like a distorted mask with a false smile and no nose. I might just be imagining things due to getting sleepy, I told myself. I was watching this thing walk for about 30 seconds from first seeing it in a distance to passing it. But the worst part was the eyes, or lack thereof. Just pitch black holes. I'll never forget the stare down it gave me. The instant I passed it, I had the only panic attack I've ever had in my life. I had to force myself to keep calm enough to get to an exit with a large gas station a few miles away. Like hell I was going off a ramp close to that thing. After I pulled into the station, I had a complete meltdown. I couldn't talk, had a hard time breathing and can't do anything. I just wanted to curl into a ball and cry. After around 30 minutes or so, I was able to compose and regain myself. While I don't think anyone would believe what I think I saw, I was convinced and legitimately scared to death. I did my research and found the footage of the same thing that I saw. This time, it has a different body but the same facial features. Based on where I found the footage, the car and the phone was found, but the guy was still missing.
Back when I was 16 years old, I had a dog named Rex, a Labrador. He always slept with me. He would never wake up at night, let alone bark or whine. This is one of the reasons I was so unnerved when I was awoken around 2:30 a.m. one dark night. When I was awake enough to know what was happening, I noticed that Rex was standing in front of the terrace door. All the fur on his back was standing on end, and he was making a noise that I have never heard him make before. It sounded like a mix between a growl and a cry. I was more worried about him than about what had frightened him at that point. That is, until I noticed what he was looking at. Rex was staring straight at something outside. He had such anger and fear in his eyes. I didn't even know such emotion could be displayed by a dog's eyes. As soon as I looked at the terrace door, Rex turned around and sprinted out of my room. I sat completely still for a minute before I gained the courage to look at the door again. I slowly turned my head. The dread began to gather, but I knew I had to. I finally turned my head the last couple inches and forced my eyes to look. There, on the other side of the street, was a giant owl, or what looked like an owl, except it was the size of a human and had teeth. I sat completely still on my bed, suppressing the childish urge to cover my face with blankets and hope whatever was out there went away. But my curiosity held me in my place. I was scared yet curious as to what it will do. Suddenly, it vanished, and all I could hear was a flap of its wings. Seconds later, I heard sounds from the roof like something dropped on it. The footsteps were heavy. They were most definitely man or man-like.
Completely still, I sat and waited. The footsteps stopped for a few seconds and they seemed to go towards the back door of my house. A sound from outside my room in the hall drew my attention away from the door. It sounded like Rex running down the hall. Before I could react, the back door opened and closed. Someone had let Rex out. My legs seemed to know what to do before I did. I was in the hall and at the back door in seconds. I just stood there with my hands hovering above the doorknob for what seemed like minutes. Paralyzing fear was preventing me from actually turning the knob, but I knew Rex was out there and I need to save him from whatever was there. With that thought, I turned the knob and threw the door open. I didn't know what I was expecting, but a complete and utter silence was not it. There, I saw this giant owl standing on the ground. I then saw Rex growling at this thing. It looked at me like I was some prey that it wanted to catch. It was grinning, showing its teeth. It opened its wings, and I can tell by its length that the wings is even bigger than me. It took flight and dove straight at me. I would have been dead and gone if not for Rex. He jumped at this giant owl right before it reaches me, causing it to grab Rex instead. Rex wailed at the pain of the long claws that went through his body, but only for a few seconds. With all the ruckus, neighbors began switching the porch lights on. This somehow agitated the owl, causing it to fly away. I am now living with my grandparents in the city, hoping that this loud noise and bright lights would deter this creature from coming after me.